The planet's got a lot of people on it. It has 6 billion today, but in the next 25 years we'll add 2 billion people to the planet. So it becomes an extremely important issue that all of us should join together to protect the planet that we're living on.
The world is growing in terms of its population, and people's aspiration to have a better tomorrow than today is, I believe, in the minds of everybody.
Each citizen, each entrepreneur and manager and each politician is responsible to keep our planet worth to live on for our children, for the next generations.
Every living system, every life support system that together make up the biosphere, they're all in decline. And it is the externalization of costs that's allowing that to happen, the trashing of the biosphere.
We're losing our biodiversity at a very rapid rate. And this is as a result of the human pressures on the environment in which we're living. We lose, as an example, timber holdings to the extent of the size of Switzerland every year.
The economy is truly the wholly owned subsidiary of the environment. The economy takes in from the environment air, fancy getting along without air, water, food, energy, and it gives off in the other direction waste, pollution, carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases, et cetera, and the result of all of that is the economy grows and the environment shrinks. How long can that go on? There is most certainly a limit, and it's in businesses' interest to be sure that stability is achieved in those flows and equilibrium is achieved. That is sustainability. The key driving force for unsustainability, in my view, is a system of economics that allows the externalization of cost. A system that attaches, focused only on exchange value without regard to use value, and puts no value whatsoever on nature.
We have to act in a sustainable way. That means that we should not use more nature than it can be recreated. And therefore I think sustainable practices are very important for companies, but I think for the society at all.
Everyone must recognize that the world which surrounds them isn't free. So we can't actually go and use the environment as if it's someone else's problem to sort out. It belongs to everybody, and so we've got to take a proportionate share in making sure that whatever we do with the external world, the externalities of activity, are somehow incorporated in the full cost of the activity that takes place, and something is done to reduce the impact on things which belong to everybody.
No normal person, be he rich or poor, would prefer to live in an arid desert without access to forests or without access to clean water, or in a polluted environment which affects their health, rather than live in an environment which can promote not only their financial wealth but their personal wealth in terms of the way in which they're living. Poor people are not very different than rich people. They know the difference between a good life and a bad life. They know the difference between clean air and unclean air. They know the difference between putting their health at risk and being able to drink the water or to live in a noxious-free environment. And so the issue is really answered by you asking yourself, why would you want to live in an environment that is being ruined. In terms of the way the corporations conduct themselves, they need to recognize that spewing out noxious fumes into the atmosphere, or putting acid into water, or putting toxic materials in the ground may be a short-term expediency, but in the long term will affect the people around them, who sometimes get so mad that they turn the factory into a rubble by tearing it down. So there is a connection between what is both ethically and morally and even economically indefensible and the pressure which comes on companies, and that is being demonstrated now in quite a number of ways, both by a push on the companies and by consumers taking products for companies which adopt what they call a triple bottom line of social responsibility, environmental responsibility, as well as profits.
For us, there are two things that we focus on, which make our business, I think, better for the future. And these are the natural environment and the way in which we deal with communities and human rights. I think it's all about progress. Technology, of course, is so critical in this area. I mean, the rate of progress of technology is not going to stop. If we look over the last 200 years, there's been continuous progress. I can't possibly believe that it's not going to carry on. The gasoline that we make today bears no relationship to the gasoline made 10 years ago. It has no benzene, no sulfur, no lead in most parts of the world. And so it's about progress. And curiously, I believe that all the problems that people see with development are best solved by more development rather than less. Every single way you look at the world, it's clear the world's going to consume more hydrocarbons every day as peoples of the world develop. One of the fundamentals of development is its energy. It gives people the aspiration to have light and heat or cool and mobility. And it's a very, very important component of the world's future progress. However we look at energy, a large bulk of it will come from hydrocarbons for the foreseeable future. I'm sure there'll be other types of engines added to the overall fleet of cars and trucks, but there's a lot of room still for huge efficiency gains and hugely better output of emissions from the internal combustion engine. Now, first question to ask is, why on earth should we bother? And indeed, some readings of the way in which the economics of business work is to say, well, we're in shareholder value, we're in the business of increasing shareholder value, and people look very short range and say, and that's a quarterly thing, every 90 days you have to do something, so let's not bother with any of this. We're in the business of being in business, and if the world's free, let's use it that way. This, I think, is a deep misconception of the nature of business. First of all, the value of a business is set by its long-term growth rate, long-term. All the value is in the future, not in the past, not in the quarter. And in my business in particular, we have to deal with 50 to 100-year timescales.
Having a sense of social responsibility and environmental responsibility does not by any means mean that you make less money than you do if you are behaving in an appropriate way.
I believe personally that we will only realize real value by doing what we do in an environmentally responsible way. In the summer of 1994, the company was already 21 years old. And for the first time, we began to hear a whisper from our marketplace, mainly from interior designers and architects, asking, what is your company doing for the environment? And we really had no answers for that. And while I was sweating, Paul Hawkins' book, The Ecology of Commerce, landed on my desk, and I began to read it. And very quickly it became, as I've described it many times, a spear in the chest, a real emotional, epiphanal experience. And it convicted me on the spot as a plunderer of the earth, and I knew immediately what I had to say to our people. And that is that we should be the company that leads the industrial world towards sustainability. Somebody has to lead. Why not us? We've eliminated half the waste in our company over the last 6 years, and that's measuring waste against perfection. That says do it right the first time, every time, no scrap, no off quality, perfection. And against that very harsh standard, we've reduced waste by half. And there's much, much more to be done there as we move ahead on closed loop production processes, including retrieving our products at the end of their useful lives and giving them life after life, capturing those precious organic molecules and giving them life after life. We've studied mountain sustainability very, very carefully, and so far we've found 7 faces of the mountain, and we're intent on climbing all 7 and meeting at the top, and that defines for us sustainability, 0 footprint. Picture the point at the top of that mountain. The 7 faces of the mountain are eliminate waste, benign emissions, to be sure whatever we emit is benign and harmless to the environment, renewable energy, first efficiency and then switching to renewable sources, closing the loop on material flows, carbon neutral transportation. When we've sited our factories near their markets, which we do, and planned logistics for maximum efficiency, which we try to do, when we video conference to save the unnecessary trip, when we've done it all, there will still be a carbon gap. And truly only the automotive industry can close that gap. We'll do our best with carbon offsets. Today we plant trees for travel. I'm told that a tree in its lifetime will sequester the carbon generated by 4,000 passenger miles in a commercial jet. So every time one of our people flies 4,000 miles, we plant a tree. Sensitizing our people and the whole community of interest, customers, suppliers, the communities from which we come, creating, if you will, an ecosystem around interface where cooperation is the prevailing mode as opposed to confrontation. And finally, reinventing commerce. When all the rest of this is in place, it will be possible for us to sell the service that our product delivers rather than selling the product itself. And that is good ecology.
We started, of course, in the question of sustainability in the late 70s and also in the 80s. There we had mainly single projects within our company. But in the second half of the 80s, we started to act more systematically. And there we started to analyze all areas of the company. And that means, of course, all processes within the company were analyzed, and we changed the processes. Another area had been the assortment of our catalogs. There we have 120,000 articles in our assortment, so it's an ongoing process to analyze all products and to change them to environmentally friendly products. Wood and cotton are very sensitive areas. So if we take wooden products like furniture or paper, how does the wood come from and how is the whole production chain? It is very important that we use sustainable forestry. We must also put the question, how can we secure this? And there we found the label Forest Stewardship Council. That's our international organization supported by many NGOs, which is giving certificates to forests which are having a sustainable forestry policy. The same with cotton. I think there we know that cotton is using a lot of water, and it's spoiling water by fertilizer, by chemicals, and therefore we have also to start with the cotton plants. We help to change cotton plants into environmentally friendly production or plants.
As you will see on television, many of the ads that are now appearing showing little children running across a carefree country scene saying, my dad works for such and such a company and they make this possible. If you're a hard-headed businessman and you're looking about marketing, those ads would not be going on television unless it was having an impact. So it's very clear in the behavior of companies that they are anxious to project not only a profitable future, but also a morally and ethically sound future. And there's a lot of reason to think that the two are not incompatible.
If a company acts sustainable, then I think it gets, of course, a positive reputation, which will help also for the public relation of the company. We have many cases where we can do environmentally friendly things and even save costs. For example, if we save energy, we save costs, and on the other hand, also it's positive for the environment. Trade, of course, is always done for economical reasons, that the trading company wants to make profits. And therefore, trading companies are importing from companies and from countries where they get the best prices. So we have to define standards which finally can be reached also by companies of the third world. And what is very important, we have to support our manufacturers to reach these social standards. As we have a certain size and therefore a certain buying power, these manufacturers, of course, are interested to meet our standards. These standards, of course, require no child labor and minimum wages and working hours and no discrimination in respect of gender, in respect of religion or ethnic groups. That is very important. They don't have the feeling that we are just dictate them what they have to do, but that we are cooperative and that we want to work together with them to help the environment, to help the people, and finally to make a good business together.
Well, the role of the private sector is incredibly important because, first and foremost, if you can provide jobs to people, that's the first key out of poverty. You need to have growth. And people that live in an atmosphere where they have opportunity and where they can improve their life standards are obviously much better able to cater to the environment around in which they live. I think behind all this is a growing recognition on the part of individual human beings that it is an economic and social cost not to take advantage of sensible practices for sustainable development. And of course the bank plays a role, a partnership role with all the players. For example, after the discussions on the various environmental treaties, Kyoto being a turning point, we started a carbon fund in which we could offer companies the possibility of reducing their exposure in terms of carbon emissions by buying certificates that would in fact appreciate the environment rather than depreciate it. That was a prototype fund with about 145 million in it, bringing governments and private sector together. What we're trying to do, and the real test of our organization, will be less the specific initiatives that we can point to in a box, but much more importantly, how they're integrated into every activity in which you're engaged.
All business, I think, in some way or another, has to think about it. All business, I believe, is beginning to think about it. There are degrees and degrees of thought. But of course, the counterbalance to all this is what governments do. And governments are there to express some sort of general intent of the populations that they govern. And they, in turn, have to have a role in providing a framework in which business can operate such that one business cannot take advantage of another business.
What we're finding is that in the bank we're being asked more and more to consult with governments on the framework in which companies should operate. And in fact, in our whole approach to development now, which we call a comprehensive approach, like a comprehensive development framework, we try and establish the good governance and the framework of laws and rights, protection of rights.
International standards are getting more and more important. As the world, the societies are getting more and more global, therefore we have to set rules how they live together, how they work together, how they play together. Rules in the financial area, rules of foreign policy, how governments are working together, but also rules how people can protect environment and how social standards are set. I think the NGOs are getting more and more important because the public realize that they are more neutral. They trust the NGOs, and therefore the NGOs are, I think, getting more and more influence in our society.
So you really want to have a development of a process in countries, both developed and developing countries, where the legal and judicial system is such that you can set up a framework for supervision and monitoring, not only through the courts, but also, may I add, through the regulatory system, through the strengthening of government. But you need a coherent system, because just regulations, unless you have a legal and enforceable mechanisms, don't mean anything.
I believe the power is with the people. I believe people have to lead. It is the people who are the marketplace. It's the people who are the voters. Government has its role. It has taxing power, and it would be possible for governments to redress the externalities and internalize the externalities through an enlightened taxation policy, taxing good things that you'd like to encourage, like income and property, to tax bad things you'd like to discourage, like waste and pollution and carbon dioxide. So a tax shift in a revenue neutral way would change the world as we know it. But ultimately, the marketplace will move business.
I think in very poor countries, the individual sometimes doesn't have the possibility to choose between different offers. Sometimes they are happy if they get some product at all. But in the industrialized countries, there we have enough competition, so the consumer really plays an important role. Every day he can decide where he wants to buy a product and what product he wants to buy.
All of us should join together to protect the planet that we're living on. It's really a planetary context, different from the way in which we were used to thinking when I went to school. But it's very real, and it affects the lives and opportunities of poor people, but also rich people.
Can business provide the leadership? One would like to think so, but for sure it cannot happen unless business comes along. Whether business leads or follows, it must be part of the solution to the problem. Otherwise, it can drag the whole effort down and destroy the effort, and in the process, destroy life on Earth as we know it. I mean, that's the alternative.
Wouldn't it be good if all the experiences that everybody had within a company or as between companies were shared, so that the best way of doing something was immediately applied to the next time you did it? The key is to find out who they are and to have a dialogue with them to see what you can learn.
There are signs, real signs, tangible signs that people are waking up. And in my mind, that is the driving force for this. It is the hope of the future, that people will rise up and demand the products, the processes, and the approaches by government.
What we're doing at the bank is trying to bring a number of these people together, and it is not difficult. It is not difficult to bring them together, both to meet with each other, to meet with civil society, to meet with environmentalists, to meet with our own people, to meet with other institutions and with government officials, just to try and kick things around on the basis that if it doesn't cost you any more to do things right, and if it preserves also the future, and it contributes to the general good, then that's a better decision than one which is to spoil the general good and make people's lives terrible. So this is not rocket science. This is just good sense for an individual and good sense for business.